I spent 10 days in the hospital after the surgery. None of my kids showed up. One of them wrote, "We have our own life, deal with it." When I got out of the hospital, I went to see a lawyer. My name's David Turner. I'm 52 years old, and I've lived in the same small town near Austin, Texas, for as long as I can remember. Most of my life has been pretty ordinary. Nothing too exciting, but enough to get by. I work as an accountant for a small firm. It's the kind of job that doesn't make you famous, but it's stable, and I've always been a stable guy. I've never craved the big city life or the high-pressure career. I was content with my little corner of the world. My wife, Mary, passed away a few years ago after a long battle with cancer. The kids were younger then, still at home, and we all went through that loss together. Emily was 22 and Jacob was 19. It was hard for them, harder than I think they let on, and it was hard on me too. I've always had this deep-seated fear of losing the people I love. It comes from somewhere. I'm not sure where. But with Mary gone, it felt like a piece of me was missing, and I wasn't sure how to fill it. So I threw myself into being the best father I could be. I worked hard, yes, but I made sure to spend time with the kids, holidays, birthdays, random weekends, just to have them home. I wasn't always perfect, but I always made sure they knew I was there. I believed that was enough. If I kept showing up, they'd keep coming back. Emily got married a few years ago, and things shifted. She had her own family now, her own priorities. Jacob, he was still trying to figure it out. He worked odd jobs here and there, still trying to find his way in the world. I didn't mind. I kept the house in order, and when he came home for a weekend or a quick visit, I was there. We would talk about everything and nothing. Cars, sports, his latest project at work. Sometimes we would sit on the porch and drink beer, just like we used to when he was younger. There was something about those moments, something that made me feel like we were still connected, even if we weren't as close as we used to be. I didn't mind. I understood. I was getting older, and I knew they had their own lives to live. But still, I thought they'd remember me. I thought they'd want to remember me. The calls started to drop off, but I told myself it was just life. Emily would send a text now and then, telling me how busy she was. Jacob would check in, but it was always brief. "Hey, Pops, everything good?" And that would be it. But then it started to feel like I was the one chasing them. I'd call, and sometimes I'd get voicemail. I'd text, and the response time would stretch out longer. I'd ask if they wanted to come over for a Sunday dinner. Something simple. And they'd tell me they were tied up with work or they had plans. At first, I told myself it was fine. It wasn't like they were ignoring me on purpose. They had their own lives now. But the thing is, I kept thinking about those old days when it was just us three, when we'd have dinner around the table, laugh about silly stuff, or complain about work. They'd always call me on their birthdays and we'd chat about life for hours. That was the life I knew, the life I thought would always be there. It was simple, but it was enough. Then it wasn't. The silence between us grew heavier with time. I stopped trying so hard, but the pain didn't go away. It never really does it? You just get used to it, like a constant dull ache that you can't quite escape. It was the beginning of summer when it happened. A regular Thursday or so, I thought. The pain in my chest started out like a small pressure. Something I shrugged off at first. I'd had heartburn before, and maybe that's what it was, right? I mean, I wasn't a young man anymore, but I didn't think much of it. I had a busy day ahead, paperwork to finish, calls to make, and the usual errands. But then the pressure didn't go away. It turned into a sharp pain, deep and unforgiving. My arms went numb, and I felt lightheaded, like I was going to fall over. I didn't want to believe it was serious, but then I couldn't deny it anymore. My chest felt like it was closing in on me, like someone was sitting on top of my ribs. I called 911. The ambulance arrived in what felt like a lifetime. The ride to the hospital is a blur. By the time I got there, I could barely keep my eyes open. I heard them talking about a heart attack. The emergency room staff working quickly, trying to stabilize me. I didn't have much time to process it, but I knew it was bad. I remember thinking, what if I don't make it through this? They rushed me to surgery, and then I was out. When I woke up, the first thing I saw were the sterile white walls of the hospital room, the beeping machines, the smell of disinfectant, and the loneliness. It hit me right away. The silence. I thought about my kids. I thought about how they'd rush to my side, like they used to when they were younger, how they'd drop everything and come running. I expected Emily to be there, maybe Jacob too. They were adults now, sure, but family is supposed to show up when things get tough, right? But no one came. The first day passed and I convinced myself they were just busy. Maybe they had work or something pressing. I mean, they both had their own lives now, so I told myself to be patient. The second day, I sent a few texts. Hey kids, I'm in the hospital. Had a heart attack. Could really use someone here. I waited for a reply. It came a few hours later from Emily. Hope you feel better, Dad. Let me know if you need anything. And that was it. No call. No, I'll be there soon. Just that one short, impersonal message. I stared at it for a long time, trying to make sense of it. I waited another day. Jacob didn't text at all. No one called. I told myself they were probably busy, that it didn't mean anything. But I knew deep down that it did. It meant something. It meant they had moved on. They were no longer concerned with me the way I had always been there for them. By the third day, I was desperate. My body was recovering, but I was still weak. I picked up the phone again and dialed Emily's number. Emily, I'm really scared. I need someone. Please. I left the voicemail, my voice shaky, weak. Nothing. I didn't even bother trying Jacob after that. What was the point? I had raised them. I had given everything to make sure they had a good life. And yet, when I needed them the most, they didn't even show up. The thought hit me like a cold slap in the face. I wasn't even worth a visit. The nurses were kind to me, but they were strangers. I could see in their eyes they pitied me, but at least they offered comfort when I couldn't find it anywhere else. They'd check on me regularly, bring me water, adjust the machines, and even chat with me while they worked. They didn't have to do that. They didn't owe me anything, but they did it anyway. And for the first time in days, I felt like someone cared. There was a man in the bed next to mine, a stranger. He had a similar procedure, and he was a little older than me, but we had the same quiet, empty experience. His kids hadn't come either. We talked for a bit, shared stories, and I could hear the same sense of betrayal in his voice. I don't know what I did wrong, he said one afternoon, his voice cracking. They just don't care anymore. That hit me hard. He had the same quiet sadness I felt. We weren't alone in our suffering, but that didn't make the pain any easier to bear. I spent the days in the hospital drifting between anger, disbelief, and deep, painful loneliness. I couldn't understand how it had gotten to this point. Hadn't I been a good father? Hadn't I given them everything I could? Eventually, the day came when they discharged me. I remember it well. I had to sign a few papers, agree to follow-up visits, the usual rigmarole. The doctor gave me the standard instructions on rest and recovery. Take it easy, he said. But I was far from feeling easy. The hospital room felt suffocating now, like the walls were closing in on me. The bed seemed too small, the air too thick with disappointment. There was no one to help me get dressed, no one to drive me home, no one to care if I made it out of here alive. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. I needed to go home. I didn't need pity or false concern. I just needed space to think, to process what had happened. I called a taxi. No one from my family offered to help me, so I had to make my own way. I'll be honest, I didn't even have the energy to argue with the situation. I'd learned a long time ago that the best way to survive life's disappointments was to deal with them quietly, to bury them deep inside where no one could see the hurt. So I paid the cab driver, grabbed my bags, and left the hospital like it was just another errand I'd run. Once I got home, I realized just how empty it was. The house was too big for just one person now. I'd spent years filling it with laughter, arguments, love, and the noise of a family. Now it felt like a tomb. I sat on the couch staring at the walls, feeling my pulse in my ears. Where were they? My kids, my own flesh and blood. It wasn't the first time they'd disappointed me, but this was something else entirely. This was betrayal. This was realizing that you're just a figure in someone's past, someone they can take or leave. I could feel my heart sinking with the weight of it. I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. I'd given them everything I had, and they had taken it without ever once looking back. I'd been the one to drive them to their first day of school, to pick them up from their first jobs, to be there for every milestone. And now I was just a ghost to them. I thought about it for a long time. What should I do next? Then it hit me. Why the hell should I keep giving? Why should I keep pouring into people who didn't care if I lived or died? Why should I continue to hold on to a version of family that no longer existed? That's when I made the decision. I needed to stop trying to hold on. If my kids couldn't show up for me when I needed them, I didn't need them in my life anymore. And I wasn't just talking about the empty promises and cold phone calls. I was talking about everything. The house, the bank accounts, the insurance, the inheritance I had planned for them. It all felt like a trap now. Oh, wait. It was time to make things right. For me. I knew what I had to do. I contacted a lawyer. I had them draw up a new will, one that left everything I had worked for to something far more meaningful than the ungrateful children I had raised. The money, the house, everything. It was going to go to a charity I had volunteered with for years, helping kids in the local community. They were the ones who had always appreciated my time, my effort, my resources. They were the ones who had shown me kindness when I was down and out. They were the ones who had made me feel like I mattered, like I still had something to give. I left a portion of my estate to a close friend who had stood by me, someone who had always treated me like family. And the rest? Well, I made sure that it went to those who actually gave a damn about people, not just the ones who were born into my family. But that wasn't all. I started to work on myself. I'd spent years giving everything I had to my kids, to my work, to everyone else. But I had never once given anything back to myself. It was time to fix that. I signed up for a gym, something I'd been meaning to do for years but had put off. I didn't need to get ripped, but I needed to feel stronger. I wanted to be able to take care of myself without depending on anyone else. I began traveling just to get away from it all. I went to places I had always wanted to see, small towns, the beach, the mountains. It wasn't much, but it was mine. It was my way of proving to myself that I could still find joy outside the walls of the life I had built. I started volunteering at a local shelter, helping people who had it worse than I did. And I felt more alive than I had in years. Time passed. The days blended together. Quiet, but purposeful. I kept to myself. The house, empty of family, became my sanctuary. There was peace in the solitude. I found comfort in the little things. A cup of coffee in the morning, a walk around the neighborhood, the steady rhythm of my new life. I wasn't waiting for anyone anymore, and for the first time in years, that felt freeing. A few months went by, and the distance between me and my kids grew. I had no idea what they were up to, and frankly, I didn't care. They hadn't bothered to reach out since that day in the hospital. Not a phone call, not a text, not even an email. I had stopped expecting anything from them, and in doing so, I realized that I didn't need their approval or their love anymore. Then came the phone call. I was sitting on the couch reading a book when my phone rang. It was Emily. My first instinct was to ignore it. What could she possibly want now? But something inside me said I should answer. I picked up the phone, and her voice was there, hesitant and uncertain. "Dad?" "Yeah, it's me," I said, keeping my tone neutral. I, I've been thinking about you. I know I haven't called, and I'm sorry." It was all I could do to keep from laughing. Sorry, after everything? After months of silence? After the hospital? Uh-huh. Well, that's nice. I tried to sound detached, but I could feel the bitterness creeping up. "Why are you calling?" There was a long pause on the other end. I could tell she was struggling to find the right words. "I just wanted to check in. How are you doing?" I could hear the genuine concern in her voice now, but it felt so hollow. It was like she was trying to play catch-up after everything had already fallen apart. "I'm fine," I said flatly. "I'm doing great." She stumbled over her words again, apologizing for being absent, saying she had been busy, that she didn't realize how bad things had gotten. It was the same story, the same excuses. I could hear the guilt in her voice, and part of me wanted to believe it, but I couldn't. Not anymore. Look, I said, cutting her off. You didn't show up when I needed you. I've had to deal with that on my own. I paused, letting it sink in. And I'm okay. I'm more than okay. I'm better than I've been in years. She fell silent for a moment. I could almost hear her processing my words. Then she came back with the real reason for her call, the one I'd been waiting for. Dad, we were hoping, we were hoping you could come to dinner sometime soon. Maybe we could talk. I smiled, but it was a cold smile. Sure, I'm sure you were hoping that. But here's the thing, Emily. I'm not the same person I was before all of this. I've changed. I don't need you or anyone else to validate my life anymore. There was a pause again, and when she spoke next, it was quieter, almost regretful. I understand, Dad. I just, I just want to make things right. I didn't respond right away. I let the silence hang there for a few seconds, feeling the weight of her words. It's too late, I said finally, my voice calm but firm. I've already made my decision. The will has been changed. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. What do you mean? Changed? Dad, what? What did you do? I've decided to leave everything I've worked for to the people who actually care, I said, my voice steady. The charity I've supported for years, the people who've been there for me, they're getting everything. And a few others, too. You and your brother, you're not in it anymore. There was a long silence, and then she spoke, her voice cracking just a little. Dad, please, don't do this. We're your family. You are, but you're not the family that matters anymore, I said, keeping my voice even. You made your choice when you chose not to show up, and now I'm making mine. She didn't say anything after that. I knew there was nothing left to say. A few weeks later, I received a letter from the lawyer confirming that everything had been finalized. My estate was set to go to the charity, to the people who had been there for me when my own blood had turned their backs. I didn't feel angry when I signed it. I didn't feel vengeful either. I just felt at peace. I had done what I needed to do for myself. The pain, the betrayal, it was all behind me now. I had taken control of my own life again, and I wasn't going to let anyone take that from me. As for Emily and Jacob, they reached out a few more times after that. But it was too late. The bridge had burned, and I wasn't interested in rebuilding it. They had their lives, and I had mine. I had no more time for people who saw me only as an afterthought. I kept living my life. I traveled more. I continued volunteering, and I worked on my health. I was building a new version of myself, one that didn't rely on the approval of anyone, especially not those who had never really cared. And as I looked out at the world, I realized something. Family isn't just about blood. It's about who shows up for you, who stands beside you when you're broken, when you need help. That's who your real family is. And I had finally found mine. I won't pretend it was easy. Some nights, especially early on, the loneliness crept in like a draft under a closed door. I'd catch myself staring at old family photos, wondering where it had all gone wrong. But every time those doubts crept in, I reminded myself, I gave them every chance. It's not on me anymore. I kept living. I started volunteering 3 mornings a week at the local community center, tutoring kids, some of whom didn't have anyone else showing up for them either. Funny thing, it felt more rewarding than all the years of parenting ever did. These kids didn't owe me anything, and still they showed gratitude just for a little bit of time and care. I took short trips too, places I always talked about but never went. Drove up to Vermont in the fall just to see the leaves change. Spent a quiet week in Montana under the wide open skies. No big plans, no schedules, just me and the open road. Sometimes people ask if I regret it. Cutting my children out of my will, walking away. Number not for a second. Life's too short to keep throwing yourself at people who can't bother to lift a hand when you're drowning. I did what I could. I loved them as best I knew how. I gave them more chances than they deserved. In the end, though, peace isn't something someone else hands you. You have to make it yourself. And I did. I made my own peace. Maybe that's the real legacy. Not the money, not the house, not the name on some deed. The real legacy is knowing I didn't let bitterness ruin me. I let go. I moved forward. And for the first time in a long, long while, I am truly free.